Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Martech Podcast, where we bring you the latest trends and insights in marketing technology. I'm your host, Sadesh, and today we're excited to have Jay Sanderson. Jay heads up awareness and advocacy at Progress Software for the Sitefinity platform, and we're really keen on insights he'll be sharing with us today. So, without further ado, let's straight away dive in. Hey, Jay, how are you doing today?
I'm really well, thanks, Sid. Great to be here and excited about our talk ahead.
Likewise, Jay, we're really excited to have you on our podcast as well. So, Jay, let's dive in straight away. I'd love to understand all about your journey. What are some experiences and learnings that you've picked up on the way? I'm pretty sure a lot of budding project managers would be keen to listen to this.
I guess my journey probably sort of started in the late 90s. I started out in software development and IT, and I really entered the scene just as that first .com boom was kind of just starting to fizzle out. Like I caught a little bit of the wave, a little bit of the white water kind of thing, but back then it was all about just, building these websites and getting traffic, and everyone was talking about clicks and .com everything and all of that kind of thing. And I remained in software development probably for around 15 years, working on all sorts of different software development projects. Did a lot of things like e-commerce, websites, customer portals, mobile applications, all of that kind of thing. And I guess somewhere along the way, I guess probably all of my kind of exposure to all of like the things like e-commerce and building all of these kind of .com businesses, I really kind of got that taste for marketing. Probably started off kind of getting involved in ad tech, so like the Google AdWords platforms, SEO back in kind of the early days, and that kind of morphed into e-commerce platforms, content management systems and whatnot. Started sort of festering away, and probably sort of around about 10 years ago, I made that sort of jump out of the, building websites and whatnot to purely sort of focusing on sort of digital marketing initiatives and whatnot. Spent a bit of time in the telecommunications space, in the B2C space, building digital marketing teams, acquiring customers through digital channels, promoting digital self-service and all of that kind of thing. And it was that, and getting involved with all of these digital experience platforms and on all of the different software that saw me sort of move from, I guess, being that marketing practitioner into working for the software companies themselves. And now I'm kind of in this position where I speak to practitioners all the time. I speak to people that are building these digital experiences. Constantly working with our product team and really kind of amplifying a lot of the cool stuff that they're building that are making marketers' lives easier, I guess. And I guess because I'm kind of like, half nerd and half marketer, I kind of get the best of both worlds. So, love talking tech, but at the same time love kind of brainstorming around marketing strategies and leveraging technology to get the most out of your marketing strategy, because I think everyone's trying to do more with less these days, right?
Absolutely. I mean, best of both worlds. That's really interesting. I'm pretty sure a lot of people would actually want to be there, right? So there's this terminology called AI propensity. I'm pretty much intrigued about it. So Jay, can you explain what AI propensity scoring is and how it can be used to predict customer behavior for marketers?
Yeah, so if we just backpedal a little bit and we think about, before we talk about propensity scoring and what that is, if we think about the way that we've maybe done, how have we been doing kind of digital marketing up until the kind of this AI boom that we're kind of all experiencing? If we kind of look at what's been happening in the last sort of 5-10 years, marketers have been quite reactive when you think about it. We create segments, we look at analytics that's historical. We might look at a group of people and we might look at what they're doing in their journey, and we're reacting to it, right? So I guess you could say that marketers are somewhat reactive, and propensity scoring really sort of shifts marketers from thinking in that reactive mindset to a predictive mindset, right? Which means that the way that it works is it's looking at propensity scoring effectively uses AI, machine learning, neural networks, all of this kind of fancy technology, and it analyzes what your customers have done in terms of interactions. Have they gone to physical stores? Have they gone to the web pages? What pages did they visit? How have they been interacting with your organization? And looks at the aggregate of all of these different customer journeys, and you can zero in on like conversion conversions that you may be looking to optimize, whether that's a newsletter sign up or a cart checkout or something like that. And by zeroing in on a conversion, you can actually look at automatically created segments of customers that have a high probability or medium probability or low probability of hitting that conversion, and that's all done by predictive analysis of past patterns. So it's looking at what your activity has been to date, looking at that, comparing that against the patterns of customers that maybe have completed the conversion before, and in real time it's doing this segmentation of customers that have got this high probability to carry out a particular action that you might want them to do. And that might be, as I said, completing a checkout, but we can also use it to do things like predicting churn. That was definitely something that I was big into back in my telco days. We all know it's much easier to keep a customer than it is to get one in the first place, right? So using predictive analytics to monitor interactions of your customers to identify which ones might have a high likelihood of leaving, and being able to segment those allows you to kind of take that audience, that group of contacts, and run them through a marketing campaign, or maybe even just hand the list over to the salespeople and get them to kind of reach out to the customers, whatever it might be. It's really the best way to kind of get excited about propensity scoring is really kind of thinking about, we're shifting from reactive, looking at what people have done in the past and reacting to that, to actually getting that list of people saying, here are the people that we think are going to be doing this in the future.
This makes perfect sense. I mean, what comes to my mind when we actually spoke about that was, we're moving to a new age concept of AI propensity, from the fact of, maybe a lead scoring module or marketing touch points from a traditional standpoint. So is that do I understand that correctly?
Yes, well, that's how it works traditionally. Like, if you think about how a customer data platform works in the bare bones, you've got the customer data that's coming in, so the demographics, maybe their purchase history, all of this kind of information that we know about the person. But then the other kind of data that you get flowing into a data platform is all of those interactions that you're having with your brand. That's the web pages that they visit, the documents they download, the searches they commit, any kind of information that you want to set up, feeding into that CDP, all of these different interactions, and all of that contact information and all of that interactions, that enables us to create segments. We can create segments to, maybe it's a segment for high net worth individuals, maybe it's university students, maybe it's people nearing retirement, whatever the segment is that's relevant to the business. We can do that with the CDP. That technology's been around for a while now, and it's quite sophisticated, and we can use those segments to deliver personalized experiences and all of that kind of thing. Where the propensity scoring makes things easier for marketing is it takes out a lot of that guesswork, because if we think about how we've had to do things in the past, we've had to go and think, well, what is it that kind of makes someone a university student? Maybe they've got to go and visit this page, maybe they've got to go and view 3 pages that have got education in the classification, that kind of thing. Propensity scoring, we can really get straight to the outcome that we're looking to zero in on: likelihood to leave, likelihood to make a significant purchase, and we can use that AI predictive capability to figure out, based on the interactions, based on the demographics, based on every bit of data that we're capturing against a customer, which ones have that high probability, that high propensity to take out that whatever action it is that we're looking to optimize or conversion.
That's really interesting. I mean, thank you so much for that insights. Now, how does propensity scoring help marketers, create targeted engagement strategies, and what are some best practices for implementing these strategies?
I think probably first off, I think when it comes to customer data platforms in general, I think you've got to think about all of the different ways that people interact with your brand. And I guess a lot of people know, when we think about AI and machine learning, a lot of people use that saying that data is like oxygen for these systems, right? So the more interactions that you've got flowing into your customer data platform, the better, and that gives you good hygiene when it comes to data. Then when you've got that, you've got to really sort of think about, well, what does my customer journey look like from a conversion perspective? When we think about conversions, we can think about our macro conversions, those cart checkouts and whatnot, or that deal closed one. And we've got to also think about what are all those micro or nano conversions that happen before that macro conversion. So if we think about like a B2B sales process, maybe someone downloads a white paper. Maybe that content's gated. So maybe that first micro conversion that we're kind of chasing is just to get their name and phone number, tick. And then the next conversion that we're after is maybe getting that meeting. And the next one is requesting a proposal. So there's all of these conversions that make up that user journey. And we could look at a B2C buying journey and we could kind of come up with our own set, right? So I think that the next thing that the marketer needs to do is to map out what all of those different nano and micro conversions are that lead up to the big conversion of the sale or the prevent the customer from leaving, or that kind of thing. Then when it comes to our technology, once you've done that, if you've got your interactions being captured and you've got your conversions set up, that's all the marketer really needs to do, because as it starts learning what people look like that complete certain conversions, it can start recognizing other ones that match that pattern. Because really, when we think about it, this is what's kind of going on behind the scenes. It's using these sophisticated algorithms to match one user's pattern with the scores of others that it's got within its database. So it's not really much to get started with it, to tell you the truth. And then it's a case of you can go and start looking at these customers that are likely to convert, and from there it's really up to the marketer to think about, okay, well, I've got this list of customers that have got this high probability of converting. What option to reach those, and that's really just going to come down to the business side. That might mean running a personalization campaign on your homepage to direct them to a particular offer or further information, or it might be that export of contacts out and to put them into the hands of the sellers to reach out in real life, or maybe run an email campaign, or even push that list out to ad tech to build targeting audiences. It's really going to come down to where your customers are when you kind of want to nudge them to that next step towards that big conversion.
Perfect, sounds good. Now, more broadly, can you discuss how AI can shape marketing strategies going forward?
I think that we've certainly been going through a lot of hype when it comes to AI. That there's no surprise there. I think one thing that blew me away today was seeing an AI generated podcast. So we can do that now. I don't know if you've seen the latest Google invention that's just dropped. So we can create a PDF file into a podcast in minutes, which is pretty crazy, right? And I think we're going to continue to get blown away by these amazing feats of generative AI and whatnot. And absolutely, as a marketer, it's super hard to not get caught up in all of this, because creating content is usually one of the huge bottlenecks that we always face as marketers. And now we've got almost too much content, and content's getting generated all over the place. I think one of the things that really kind of remains, and now it's probably more important than ever with a sea of content being out there, is having original ideas and actually introducing new content into the market. So I'm all for generative AI to be used where it's applicable, but we can't lose sight of the importance of original content. That's kind of what we're going to be kind of looking for. But we can take original content, say for example, this conversation that we're having, this is two human beings, an exchange of the minds. We could take a transcript of this podcast and we could use generative AI to convert this into an article. We could use generative AI to convert this into all sorts of different things, right? And I think to me that's exciting, right? Because I don't like sitting down writing a lot, right? No, I'm much more comfortable kind of talking with people or using Gen AI to kind of create things. So it's your personal assistant. It's a great tool for structuring thought. There's so many ways that I've incorporated it into my everyday. Like I might use AI to review something that I've written. Give me critical feedback on this article that I've written. How would you improve it? How do you feel it is going to resonate with my target audience, which I'm setting out to? Getting feedback. It's great for ideation. Yeah, there's just really sort of so many ways to use it. I think probably the challenge and where there's some really innovative solutions kind of coming down the line is we've all seen AI hallucinate, right? We've all asked it a question and been impressed that it's pushed out the text, but when you've kind of dug deeper, that's not really correct. There's no explainability to it, right? So AI could just be this guy sitting on the street, like, or your neighbor. You can ask them a question, they can give you an answer, but you've got no way to kind of validate whether it's correct or not. And that's where like sub technologies or processes within the generative AI capability, like there's one that we're doing a lot of work with here at Progress called retrieval augmented generation, and what that's all about is actually incorporating your own data within that generative AI process. The way that I like to explain this to people, it's kind of like if you've ever been to a library, if you're old enough to remember a library, and having to go to a library for school, and maybe you had to do an assignment. And do you remember photocopiers? Remember those
Yes.
things, right?
Yes.
So you'd go to a library maybe, and you'd have to do an assignment, and you'd grab a few books off the shelf, and you'd go to the photocopier, and you'd photocopy all of these pages to do your assignment. And that's kind of what retrieval augmented generation is for AI. So it's the prompt, the request, and it's actually hitting up private data stores. It might be proprietary data, private data, that kind of thing, and it's extracting those photocopies. In this case, we call them embeddings, and it passes that through to the generative AI. So it's really kind of a case of like, it's like saying to Gen AI, hey, here, do my homework for me. Here's the photocopies that I need you to use as the basis of that. And what that actually gives you back is results that have got a much less chance of hallucination. And in addition to that, you're getting back the explainability. So here's an answer to your question, or here's an article that you've asked me to write, and I'm going to cite all my sources. So having that capability become more and more available is going to be really, really encouraging. So you can how marketers might be able to apply that if they're able to interact with generative AI services that have that backed up by the supporting data and information to prevent that hallucinations. I would like to write a blog about this new product that I'm launching, and here's all of the product information in PDF format or databases or whatever it is.
Now we understood how it helps market, right? So, but on the contrary, we slightly discussed it previously as well. But I guess on the contrary, what are some challenges you think might marketers face when integrating AI into their existing strategies, and how do you believe they can overcome these challenges?
Well, I think for one, now marketers can create content so quickly. I think this really kind of introduces that need for good old-fashioned governance, right? So marketers are using a content management system. Content management systems generally have things like workflows. So it's probably important now more than ever to really look at what your strategy is around content governance, because as great as it is to be able to create content quickly, I think this now what we need to do is make sure that we're pushing things through the right approval processes and whatnot before they kind of get published, just to make sure that we don't release anything that we don't want to be seen. And I think also that in saying that though, we need to think about like it might be great to be able to quickly put out some content where you've used generative AI to maybe personalize the experience, to maybe make it easier on someone. We need to think about what's the risk profile if Gen AI gets it wrong. Maybe if we're producing legal documentation, absolutely you've got to push it through that extensive governance process. But maybe there's other areas where we're using generative AI to create experiences that maybe people aren't used to seeing, simply because Gen AI didn't exist a few years ago. So there's this hyper personalization that people talk to, where you're seeing a version of a homepage that's created for you based upon your previous service history and where you live and all of that kind of thing. This is all really, really possible now, but it's how much trust do we hand over to generative AI is going to produce. And if we're using technologies like this retrieval augmented generation, that's going to obviously mitigate some of those risks, but still, to be totally safe, you really need humans injected somewhere in that approval flow.
Absolutely. I mean, the human element, I think, can never go away. But yeah, I mean, it's just that time will tell. But you spoke about content creation. So What about content creation and user experience? How and to what extent should marketers integrate AI?
That's really kind of worthwhile calling out here. And a lot of people, it's so easy to be continually amazed at what's kind of coming out on the generative AI scene each and every day. And I think we all kind of remember that sort of time that we sort of saw Gen AI spitting out those words and being amazed about it. We've got to remember that in terms of maturity as a technology, we're still probably 5 years away from seeing it reaching any kind of plateau. And if we compare that to something else that's been, some other technology in our past, such as like the smartphone, we think back to what an iPhone 1 was like. That was about 2007, 2008, if I'm not mistaken. Everyone was really impressed with those. That as a technology when that first iPhone came out. But go and look at an iPhone 1 now and compare it to the device that you're used to seeing now. And we can also think back to that time when that device came out. The other thing that we saw is we saw a lot of really, really crappy apps in the marketplace. Lots and lots of silly, stupid iPhone applications that people were using. And I think we're going through a little bit of that with AI at the moment, right? Because there's a very, very low bar to entry when it comes to building AI apps now, because AI can build the apps. It seems like every second YouTube video that I see, it's like how to build an AI application and retire tomorrow. Like they're the snake oil salesmen, or they're all out there, selling all of these different AI apps. And I think that people really, really need to understand some of the core fundamentals of the technology, how it works. Understand that when it comes to AI, there's really only a few players in the world that are doing the really heavy lifting when it comes to AI. That's making the processing chips or writing the large language models. Everything else is relatively adjacent. And when we look at where the real value is going to come from, it's going to come from the curated and clean data sets that we're able to feed into it. Because everyone's got access to this AI general knowledge, but the differentiators for the businesses are going to be who can actually leverage their bespoke proprietary data with the AI technology, and in addition to that, building the right interfaces for their customers, prospects, and what have you to interact with it. Because the generative AI technology is going to become quite ubiquitous, right? It's like electricity.
Makes sense. Now, talking about the future, Jay, what future trends do you foresee in the use of AI for marketing, particularly in context of customer convergence?
I like to think of marketing quite holistically. For me, marketing is as much about keeping the customer as getting them in the first place. I'm really excited about the ways in which generative AI can be used on the customer service front, being able to do things like providing conversational interfaces, whether that's through chatbot style or using speech-to-text technology, to allow people to, again, interact with your organization's data in their own language, in their own phrasing, in their own vocabulary. So there's some really kind of great advancements in terms of applying different semantics over the same data set, because the way that I might ask a question if I was talking to a hospital as just an uneducated, I'm not a medical man, I'm not a science man, but the way that I might make an inquiry is going to be different to the way that a doctor's going to make an inquiry, the way that maybe a health insurance professional might make an inquiry. We all have different vocabulary, different words for the same thing. So I think that's a really kind of exciting area for me, where no one likes to be waiting on hold to speak to a live agent for an hour, and then only to find that they can't help you, or maybe to find that they'll say, oh, just log into the customer portal and do it yourself, or whatever, right? Like time is precious. So I think that from the customer side of things, I think that's going to be great. I think that we're going to see really, really smart assistants that are going to be able to help us in so many steps of our customer journeys. I do worry a little bit about that we're going to lose creativity, but I think at the same time, I'm pretty excited. I think AI used in the right way can put creative skills, writing skills into people that may not. either have been able to write or maybe not had that ability. Not everyone is Ernest Hemingway. I certainly am not, but I love the fact that I can kind of sit down with ChatGPT and I can start with an idea in my head, and after a bunch of back and forth, I can actually kind of get something that I can then sort of throw into Word and just kind of hack away at and take it that last mile. I think generative AI, I keep saying it's really great at getting someone to 80% complete quickly. But I think that the focus still needs to remain on the last mile. And I think there's also a lot of value to be placed in the effort that goes into building up your generative AI environment. Do you build custom GPTs? How do you write your prompts? Do you provide it with the right knowledge? There's a really great prompt technique that I like to use to try and kind of keep a lot of that originality, or to try and make sure that my thoughts are front and center when it comes to the output. And it's very, very easy prompts to remember, and I'll pass this one out to your audiences. And it kind of goes like this, and just replace these inputs with the obvious. But this prompt might look like, act as an expert in topic. I'd like you to interview me and ask me 10 questions about this topic. If you understand, ask me the first question. Now what that will trigger off is Gen AI will go and then ask you one by one the 10 questions, where your answer to the first question will then steer where the next question goes. And then once it's answered those 10 questions, it's now got context where it's taken all of your answers, and then you can get it to write the article. And then so that's a real go-to for me. Or act as a journalist, interview me about this, ask me 10 questions. If you understand, go. That's a real go-to prompt for me. Like if I can start with an idea, because it's all up in your head with all of the videos and the content that you consume. It's a great way to kind of get things going.
Absolutely. I mean, Gen AI is something I've been reading about a lot. Generative AI is something I've been reading about a lot, and I personally am excited to see how paves the way. Some personal questions you don't mind answering, because of the fact that I presume you have a lot to share in terms of AI marketing. Based on the traditional lead scoring module, and how things have been aligned in the I wouldn't say recent old days, because it's still been going on. How do you see that, that's a flawed, is that a flawed concept first of all? Or if it's not a flawed concept, how do we make that better? AI propensity, as you suggested, could be the way for it. But apart from that, what exactly do you think we can make or do to make it better?
On the lead scoring, I think about lead scoring is it's really where someone is in the journey, and I guess that, like, I'm sure in some situations that it makes sense, but I think now more than ever the general customer journey, it's anything but linear. There's so many different channels that we can consume content and whatnot, and there's so many different ways that we can interact with the brands, whether that's online, offline, whether that's on their site, whether it's off their site, on social media, and what have you. Really just more a fan of looking at, I guess, what are the different touch points in the journey, which ones are common touch points that might provide uplift towards conversion. You could potentially look at attribution modeling and whatnot. But I think sometimes it's really tricky, because someone might be interacting with your brand, but then they might not be identified. They might be visiting your website on a new machine and in a browser session where they haven't logged in. They haven't identified themselves. So there's lots of I guess traps there that you need to be aware of. But I think lead scoring is definitely a capability that we offer in our technology, and I really kind of push people to think about this is someone's customer journey stage. So lead score might not just be around propensity to buy. Lead score could be someone's just made a complaint. Where are they at in that journey? Has the complaint been, has the complaint solved? Are they still waiting? Because I think it's there's two kind of key facets when it comes to segmentation. One's knowing about who someone is. Maybe I'm someone that's interested in a home loan or something like that. But then where am I at in my customer journey is also important. Am I just researching? Am I, getting close to making that decision? All of that kind of thing. So I think they both have a great. I think most people are on the page now that customer journeys just don't really sort of follow such a linear pattern these days. They can just be all over the place on, I think, what is it? The average person now has something like 7 or 8 screens in their possession, right? It makes it tricky.
Makes sense. And one last question. We actually discussed this in the podcast as well as there's a fine line between where AI cannot actually take over, which is basic human creativity, right? So because human creativity is always going to be there, but how do we make sure that there's this balance between human creativity as well as making sure that AI does this work as well? Because of the fact that I personally believe that the more and more reliant we get on AI is pretty much learning every now and then, right? But the more and more we'll rely on AI, the creativity lessens every now and then. Because in the near future, there'll be a time where creativity takes a hit because of AI. So do you firmly believe in it, or is there something?
I think it's an interesting question. I think right now, I would almost argue that Gen AI can be creative, but I think it comes down to the user. It's like it's the new paintbrush, right? I think if you can give Gen AI to a creative person, I think you'll get some creative output for sure.
So yeah, that's pretty much it. Well, Jay, it's been fantastic having you on the Martech Edge podcast, and thank you all for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a review. And don't forget to check out Progress, where Jay and his team are delivering the products, expertise, and the vision you need to achieve transformational success in the face of disruptive change. Stay tuned with Martech Edge for more insights into the ever changing world of marketing technology. Until next time, this is your host, Sadesh, signing off.